What's the weirdest stuff you've seen go down while just chilling and doing your thing? I was stopped at a red light once and the cops must have been running a sting on somebody, because all of the sudden there were cops everywhere pulling over a car a couple lengths ahead of me. They had plainclothed officers that looked like homeless people on the street pull their badges around their neck and draw their guns. It was surreal, like something you'd see out of a movie. Wife and I went out to a local pasta place for dinner. There was a college-age looking couple there having spaghetti, and they started feeding each other spaghetti with their hands, like 2-year-olds might do, like smearing it on their faces and making a huge mess. We were horrified that anyone would do this as a public restaurant. It was many days later on that we found out they were acting as part of a sociology experiment being done by a grad student at the local university. I once saw a small herd of deer trot out of the woods near my house, walk single file down the sidewalk, then stop and look both ways before crossing the street. It was kind of like stumbling into a Pixar film. I was sitting on the Chicago Riverwalk with my friend back in summer 2017. We were outside the wine bar just enjoying the night and waiting for the rest of our friends to get there. Out of nowhere, this middle-aged woman in full business attire took her empty wine glass and tossed it into the river instead of taking it back to the bar. Some guy yelled at her to not do that and she said no worries, I'll get it, and jumped into the river like it was no big deal. After like a minute she popped back up with a wine glass in hand and asked someone to help her out of the nasty water, and walked to the bar and dropped off the glass and went her way. I once swatted a wasp that was attacking me into a spider's web, watched it get eaten alive while I was smoking a blunt. I work as a pedicab driver in a town with mule carriages. Fireworks went off unexpectedly and caused all the mules to scatter, causing pandemonium on the street. A runaway mule carriage plowed straight into my pedicab while I was chillin' and doing my thing. A woman started shouting at me, saying how I cheated on her. I have no idea who that was, but it was really embarrassing. My sister and I were just chilling outside the hotel, eating breakfast the morning of her wedding, when about 100 cop cars and SWAT descended on the hotel on other side of the street. Turns out it was a major meth ring inside the hotel. Was just chilling back in college with some housemates watching a movie. Another one came in with a few acquaintances of his, laid out some drugs on a table, and they all snorted and then left without saying a word. Working reception on Camden Road, a pretty busy high street, old dude went to step down from the curb to cross the road. His ankle gave way and he collapsed right into the path of a bus. Was only 15 and watched his head pop like a watermelon under the tire. One time I was at a coffee shop and I was sitting at a little table outside. I see this guy coming down the main street with a ladder, and he's watering the plants that are up on these poles. He was a nice-looking young man, but I didn't pay too much attention. Eventually, he's right in front of me on the ladder and his pants are falling nearly all the way down, showing his bare ass. He must have felt the breeze and made no effort to pull them up. I don't know if he did it for my enjoyment, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. Once while working security, I watched a fat wealthy man in a white suit and fedora laughing like Jabba the Hutt while both a man and a woman in very skimpy attire danced before him for his pleasure. It was both disturbing and a little entertaining in that this guy could be a comic book villain sort of sense. A woman followed me downtown threatening to kill herself. I was waiting for the bus on campus at college. There was a guy chatting with a girl on the bench. I thought they were friends, but then I saw the next bus came, not the one I'm waiting for, and she quickly got on. Then the guy started walking around aimlessly and keep looking at me and everything around every time he turned towards me. Then when the bus started moving, he ran after it and tried to kick the rear, which I found really weird, and came back and walked around aimlessly and looked at me several times again. I started to realize this guy was weird and that girl was probably uncomfortable around him. Later my bus comes and he gets on along with 2 other guys. The 2 guys have a conversation, and the weird guy starts interrupting their conversation, acting like he's one of their friends, and they found it awkward and didn't say anything back. The weird guy then start going woo-woo like Ric Flair randomly, but not super loud. That dude was a creep. Chilling at the casino with some friends when we were suddenly surrounded by a dozen cops and guards. Mistaken my friend for someone who robbed a gas station earlier that day. I was once walking home from picking up a pizza. My apartment was in a pretty good part of town, but there was a halfway house that I passed by. As I was walking home, I saw that 2 of the residents were out on the sidewalk arguing loudly. As they were doing this, one of them pulled his leg back and kicked the other in his shin super hard. The dude's prosthetic leg went flying and he fell over. I feel bad for laughing at the time, but it's something you don't see every day. Someone came out of the house to defuse the situation right after this happened. Waiting in line at the bank, guy in line shit himself gave me direct eye contact while doing it. Having dinner my wife in a Mexican restaurant, off night like a Tuesday or something, heard yelling from the kitchen and a guy comes running out into the dining room and out the front door blood all over him. Seconds later, another guy and knife is after him. Cooks at a fight, was managing a restaurant years ago, went into the walk-in to get some lemons for the bar. The dishwasher was sitting on a 5-gal pickle bucket giving a BJ one of the prep cooks. I was in Northern Ireland in March of '88. I'm at a cafe eating lunch when all of a sudden a British APC armored personnel carrier came around, dropped the rear deck. A squad of British soldiers storm out. The PC has a machine gun that is manned and a few of the soldiers had squad automatic weapons and the rest have rifles also. About 5 minutes later the squad comes back with a guy that was blindfolded and handcuffed. I take it they were IRA. I was on leave there from the US Army and it seemed a bit surreal. I once saw an attempted kidnapping which I realized when the cops rolled in and the guy dropped his gun and sped off. Luckily, someone else had seen it at an earlier stage and recognized it. I learned that sometimes kidnapping is like drowning in that it doesn't look how you think it does. January 2010, in a Waffle House at 2 a.m. with my date and her friend. The staff handed us keys, told us to watch the restaurant, and they all left for about half an hour. We'd already been there for a few hours and weren't leaving soon anyway. No reasons were given and no questions were asked. They came back and comped our bill. $1,210. I love Waffle House.